record goal scorer, Leslie Brad. And we're also joined by Beth Curzon, former Notts County, most recently just come back from Bulgaria, and as we'll hear very shortly, planning her next move. Beth, Les, a very warm welcome to you both.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, Paul.
And always a pleasure, Les. And it's good timing because as the club's record goal scorer, you can run the rule for us over a hot young prospect that we've signed. Three signings today. Lewis Knight from Bradford Park Avenue, centre-back Mark Ellis, who on his Twitter bio says, head it, kick it, tackle. So I think we know what we're going to be getting there. And the young right-back Kenton Richardson. We've had a few right-backs this season and hope he can get a few games under his belt. Talking International Women's Day with Beth as well. But let's dive into these new signings because I know that's what we're all interested in. Les, Lewis Knight, Bradford Park Avenue. You're probably one of the few people that's probably played at can remember playing at Bradford Park Avenue when they were a league club. A young lad in the mould of Kel Roberts is clearly a signing that's going to excite the fans, yeah?
Yeah, I've read Neil Warnock's article on the website today, and it looks like all the hallmarks of a Cal Roberts signing. Started at the big club Newcastle, then went down to Blythe Spartans. You know, this lad started off at Leeds and gone on to Bradford Park Avenue. I think he's scored into double figures, is he? Something like that from 15 appearances, and also made a lot of goals as well. Well, that's Cal Roberts all over. I know Neil is very keen to have cover in every position on the pitch, not as substitute cover, as equal merit cover. So we can put one in and leave one out with a view that the one coming in will do just as good as the one that's gone out. So that's his belief. I find it strange. It's not sort of a game that I grew up playing. You know, if I'd scored 2 goals on Saturday, I'd want to be in that game the next week. But that's how it is, and you know, I go along with that philosophy. And we brought 3 players in today. It's really strange this right back position. The number of players that have played in the right, you know, with Brindley, with Evans, and just so many that over the recent years that have come in and got injured. But he's got cover there. And centre half, I know he wants a player in there that can go and win that ball, head it away. And that's what this lad does. When you look at his record, he's played in the league and done that. So let's just hope he can come in there and do likewise for us and help us to get up there. If we can't get automatic promotion, let's get in them playoffs and get the job done.
Beth, as a player and as a fan, 3 signings in one day. This is kind of a signal of intent, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's really exciting to see, to be honest. I've looked up the players today and kind of looked at the records and stuff. It looks really good, you know, especially Ellis, kind of experienced. I've seen he's like 6'2", so a big guy at the back. And I had a look at what Ardie had said about him and stuff, and he kind of likened him to Rawlinson a bit, which sounds like a nice partnership. And if, you know, Rawlinson ever needs to be sub, you know, because we are playing a couple of games a week now, it's important for players to not feel panicky, and they still can feel they can take some kind of risk on the pitch without worrying, will I be out and is there anyone to cover me, kind of thing. So it's really, really exciting. I'm excited. So hopefully these players can help push for promotion. So.
I was smiling to myself when you said 6'2". Do you remember the chant, Les? Nah, excuse me, Beth, because you will think me and Les have gone off our trolleys. This, believe it or not, 1971-72. This was the chant from the fans. 6'2", eyes are blue. Leslie Brad is after you, and so it went on. Do you remember that, Les?
I look forward to playing at Meadow Lane with coming out of that tunnel and running across to the County Road corner. That's where the main group that started that song off, and I always saluted them. And yeah, I feel sorry for the lads of today because they're missing out on all of that, aren't they? The hardcore support that gets behind the team, that recognises when they're struggling a bit, they're not on it, and they give them a lift. And we've gone through that, and those players will be missing that. Sometimes it isn't going right, and I hear supporters moaning and groaning over recent matches. I see it on social media, and that's where the supporters kick in sometimes. They help to give the players a lift and carry them on. And it was amazing how at the Dagenham and Redbridge game that they were able to do that off their own back. I don't know who kick-started it, whether it was Michael Doyle in goal, and after the lad missed a penalty, he went in front of him, didn't he, and got in front of him. And every single player that night in that team lifted their game. They moved out of third or fourth gear into sixth gear. Every single player, it was just unbelievable. And I felt at that time, I had to go on social media. I don't do it normally, but I congratulated the players because that was something special. And I thought that's going to be a defining moment. We kick on, but unfortunately, it hasn't gone quite that way. And I know we've probably only lost one in there, but we haven't been playing as well as we could. And somehow it needs to get a lift, and maybe new players, faces coming in will do that.
Beth, Les and I are kind of from the Jurassic era, okay? And football has evolved a lot since when I was a lad watching it, and Les was hanging at the far post and nodded them in. And clearly, Neil, a lot of the appliance of science, fitness, closeness to injury, rotation policy. Talk to us as a young person playing the game professionally. The player's approach is different to rotation than perhaps the players from a previous generation. Discuss a little bit.
Yeah, from my experience personally, to be honest, in every team I've been in, it's kind of, I've been brought up that it is just common knowledge that you could have been the best player on that pitch. And like Les said, it's not changed that you want to be on that pitch the next game, but it's become more widely accepted that you might be benched for the entire 90 minutes. I mean, Sam is a good example, scoring.
I was going to ask, go on.
And then not playing again. And what I will say is it's very, very different kind of fan side to player side. 90% of things that go on, fans don't really know the reasoning. Sometimes the players don't, but you've got to trust that the players are having the experiences with the manager where there's some sort of communication. There could be a reason you're not being played, but definitely there is a big change from football back in the day to now. I mean, I speak to my dad and he said, look, he was a winger at the time, and when England won the World Cup, they didn't use wingers, he said, and it kind of everything swapped and wingers were dropped out, and so he could have been the best player in the team, but he wasn't getting on. And likewise, if he was playing well, he'd get on the 90 minutes, or he'd play left wing and he'd play 90 minutes, every game. Whereas now, I've played some great games, I've scored a couple of hat-tricks and stuff, and I won't have been on. And it's kind of something you got to accept, that you do have a bigger squad nowadays. So yeah, it's a really interesting point to mention. Definitely, every team I've been at has definitely been a huge squad rotation. Even in Bulgaria, we had a huge squad, younger players, older players, and you just kind of accept it. I didn't want to be on the bench at all. I would have, I thought I was worthy to play full 90, but it's definitely more common knowledge that you kind of bigger squad, equal chance as well. The manager has their own thoughts, so yeah, there's a definite shift.
I mean, we hear now of kind of the manager almost saying to players, you'll play Saturday, you won't play Tuesday, and you'll play the Saturday, based around fitness in legs. And so as a player, how does that make you feel?
To be honest, I think it kind of depends how you feel as a player, even with self-belief and stuff. If you take things personally, it can really bog you down and affect your performance. That's something I've struggled with more recently. If I'm not on, I think, oh my goodness, I've been horrendous, or I'm not good enough. And, because different managers say, if you're the better player of the right back position, you'll be playing. And it took a shift between different managers of mine, whereas I could have been the best player on that pitch and I'm still not playing the next the Tuesday, but I will on a Saturday, that kind of thing. So I think if you struggle kind of self-belief or confidence-wise, it can be a bit difficult. But again, that's down to you speaking with the manager, understanding the reasoning. But often I've had the experience where I've been told, you will get a full 90 this game, or you probably won't get on. So yeah, it does vary from manager to manager, but again, yeah, it does very much happen, and it can knock your confidence quite a lot, really, if you can't work out if it's because of your ability or just saving legs and things like that.
So kind of almost in Les's day, you would probably have 6 or 7 players ever present every game, every minute, and others within field, subject to injuries. Is it a different mentality among a younger player now, where they almost accept you're the best player for every 90 minutes, but you're far from assured, if at all, that you're going to be playing every game?
Yeah, I think it's more accepted now. I think you still have to have that hunger within you, and players do get upset still. I think that's part of the game. I think you do have to be that kind of person. Why am I not on? You need to be questioning it. But you definitely do understand that, there's double the amount of players around you that there would have been 30 years ago. That is just the way that football's gone. You could argue that, especially in women's football, the kind of pace, intensity, and caliber of players has got better. So we need a bigger array of players. Maybe that's part of the reason. But you're definitely right. It's just part of football now, and it's kind of something you have to accept. And but there is also obviously still a big culture of, upset, why am I not playing, that kind of thing, within each player. But yeah, it's like an acceptance that you just do have a bigger squad, a lot more people around you now.
Very interesting debate, Les, because clearly we come from different eras, different levels of acceptance. You still got to say, Eli Sam's been a bit unlucky, hasn't he?
Well, just interesting listening to Beth. It's 50 years this year, as you well know, since we won the 4th Division Championship. I think the stats, if you go into the stats, there'll be 7 or 8 players who played over 40 matches that season. One reason why you wouldn't be rotated is because you were on appearance money. You were on win goal money. That was key money in your earnings. The basic salary wasn't a great deal in those days, and the performance related earnings certainly kicked it up. But we played Easter, we're coming up to Easter. We played Good Friday, we played Saturday, we played Monday, but all teams were in the same boat. They didn't carry the big squads. They had probably a squad of 15 players. There was only one sub that can go on there, and that sub that came on wasn't a tactical substitution in those days. But I can't ever remember thinking I'm too tired to play. We all did the same thing. The players, you all played on a Saturday afternoon. There was none of that going on where, you take a rest. I don't know. I still find it very difficult to understand. I know that players of today, they're geared up with equipment on them that measures the heartbeat, that measures everything that's going off in the body, that can detect if there's a likelihood of an injury about to come. So, that wasn't around in my day, so I can't really pass comment to the reasons why we were able to do it and play all of those games. I think Bob Worthington played every single league game 2 successive years. I think it's just incredible, really, and didn't look any worse for wear in any of those games.
Because Bob leads us neatly on to Halifax on Tuesday evening. Bob, of course, the Worthington family very much cut their teeth at Halifax. I'm not a massive stats man. I think these are interesting stats. In the last 15 games, these are the goals for and against for Notts and Halifax. I pulled off someone Notts County News or Notts County Stats. Very interesting. Goals scored. So in the last 15 games, goals scored, Notts 17, Halifax 33. Goals against, Notts 8, Halifax 23. So clearly Halifax see an awful lot of goal mouth action, don't they, at both ends? Not very tight, and of course sometimes not getting the goals at the one end to get the 3 points and having to settle for the one. We spoke about the owners. It's three new signings. We've had a break, albeit one Saturday enforced by COVID with Aldershot. Does it, in a way, with the new signings, put more pressure on Notts over the next few games, given they have a larger squad than most? 3 games without a win. We live in a bubble, don't we? We live in a bubble where everything is scrutinised to the nth degree. Notts have got this couple more home games on the spin now. How do the players cope with that, Les?
Well, back at Christmas time, I think that's probably the last time I got to see a game. I was quite fortunate to have a chat with one of the players that was injured, wasn't playing that day, and I said, "What's it like out there playing a game and without fans?" And they said it was horrible. The lad I was talking to was a striker, and he said, if you score a goal, you don't know if it's a goal or not, because you're used to a roar going up when there's a goal, and you're looking around to see whether the ref's blown the whistle. And he did actually say, we miss the crowd, we miss our home support. They give us a lift. They're a fantastic crowd at Meadow Lane, and so we are certainly a club that misses out on home matches big time because of the crowds that we carry. I don't know what Neil will do moving into tomorrow. Like you said, he's got 3 new signings. I can't see that all of them will be playing tomorrow. He will have had a team ready to go against Aldershot. Probably struggling in a position where one might drop in. So it's going to be interesting. But on the stats, on the attacking and defending, we went to Halifax last year. We're losing at half time. We finished up winning 4-2. So there was a lot of goals in that game. But I know Neil is very, very attack minded. He wants to use all the pitch. He wants players to be very, very creative. And he also leaves them to their own flair around the 18-yard box to create and hopefully score chances. But we have been having a problem, and I think probably that biggest problem is being in midfield. We're not playing through the midfield as we should be doing. Teams have pushed up on us, and we found it difficult. And we've gone with longer ball, and then not able to get up there supporting. So hopefully, they're working on these things behind the scenes, and it can kick in place.
Beth, I mean, I've noticed I'm not a fan of social media, but you kind of have to monitor it, being in PR and all the rest of it. And clearly some Notts fans get frustrated by, if you like, the building from the back, the possession-based approach when we don't win. And I've seen that you are on social media. You've been strongly defending Neil and the players. Give us your perspective and views on it.
I think it's very obvious we have the ability, obviously, to absolutely hammer teams. We've got, every player has their strengths. I think at the moment it's a huge struggle. And like you said, I think lots of people online can kind of get caught up in the moment and the passion, and they're upset with people and players, and that kind of comes out less constructively than it should be. And, sometimes I tweeted recently and I said, look, you cross a line once you kind of, it veers into sort of an insult. You can say this could be improved, but no player wants to make a mistake. And unfortunately, everybody's on social media. It's likely they're going to see this. And personally, myself and people that I know play football, comments on social media and what other people think of you do make a difference when they're your fans. Not only are you missing them, and we're not there to cheer the players on themselves. If they were to, log online after the last couple of games and see some of the comments, I know I would be quite disheartened by that. And whether you would or wouldn't, it's still not the right way to go about things. What I will say is I've noticed kind of in the last few games, Doyle's quite a big player in midfield that we like to play through. He kind of steps forward, brings the ball, plays it back and turns. And I thought it was very interesting when he actually did a Schmeichel and went in goal. That is actually probably one of our better performances in the midfield once that happened, because I think the other players around him had to drive forward because Doyle wasn't there to do his usual job. And I think what we need to do is give the players the license to be creative, because I think we've been lacking that a little bit. You know, when you think of the likes of Enzio and Rodriguez, we know what they can do. We know what they can do outside the box, but it just hasn't been happening so much recently. I'm not saying it's all down to this, but I think the pandemic in itself is enough to understand that we're still expecting the same performances from players, and we're in a pandemic. I think that's enough to give them a bit of an excuse anyway. Obviously, I know it's your job and things like that, but also I think it needs to be visible that all the fans are behind them. You know, we can't wait to get back and that kind of thing. So I think maybe the knowledge that the fans are frustrated might be weighing on them a little bit, maybe. You know, I know a couple of the players, past and present, and I had a comment once from one of the players, and he said to me, "I don't think the fans like me." And I thought that was such an interesting, one of the better players that we'd had at that time. And I thought it was just very interesting. And obviously, I think it affects players more than people think it does. So you don't know what they're reading, that kind of thing. So I think it's just really important for everybody to be behind the players visibly, because I think it's tough times, everything's different, and it's doable. You know, we're halfway through the season. You know, the FA Trophy is going on. We're being successful. We do need to up our goals, but it will come with the right belief and the attitude. And we just definitely have the players. I think it's about being positive at the moment. So,
very, very good points, Beth. I've said this before, Les. I think one of the challenges we faced this season is that, and Neil's mentioned this in some press conferences, and I think he addressed the players about this, because Ben Turner gave a very good interview after the home game with Stockport in the league that we won 1-0, is that Notts County are expected to play well and win every game this season. There's hardly a game that we will play in this league where if we draw, fans won't say, very few games fans will say a draw is a good result for us. Every game we are expected to win, home or away, one or two exceptions. And sometimes I think in life and football, it's easier to prove people wrong than it is to prove people right. Do you detect any of that, Les? Or, I mean, is it a different psyche to play for a bigger club in a smaller pond and expect to win than it is almost being a smaller fish in a big pond and going a little bit under the radar a lot of the time with not a lot expected of you?
Yeah, and I'm sure that will apply to most teams that are coming to play at Meadow Lane. You know, the manager will be sending them out. You know, what a lovely place to come and play football. All the pressure's off them. We saw Kings Lynn play last week. You know, they're struggling down at the bottom of the table. They got beat 3-0 on Saturday. And I thought they played some really good football last week. You know, they could have scored probably 3 or 4 goals. So without the crowd in there, it becomes a lot easier for the opposition to play there, and players can play much easier. And the other way around, like you say, the Notts lad will find it tough. They're expected to win every game by scoring 4 or 5 goals. That is the pressure that social media comes with, isn't it? It's the name Notts County, oh, that's a league club, oh, they should win, they should finish first in that league, anything else isn't good enough. And I'm pretty sure that if we could have carried on a year ago, like we were when we had to finish, I think it was Eastleigh, was it, when we won 4? Yeah. We were flying at that time. The players were all there. They'd been working together. It was looking so good. And then it stopped. And then ever since that time, it's been stop-start. It's the pandemic, and the other teams got to call it off. And you know, I think there's been 4 games called off on a Friday. You can just imagine the players getting themselves ready for the big game on the Saturday, going all through the week, and then they're told on a Friday, oh, it's off. You know, what do you do then? How do you go through the weekend, and how do you lift yourself? It must it must be a real struggle for them all to come through this. But yeah, still a long way to go. We haven't even played half the matches yet this season, and we're coming to halfway through March. Just in incredible times, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, psychologically, this is Christmas, really, in terms of the stage of a season. We think because it's March, we're nearly there. We have played bang on half. And James Spring, our Weymouth-based Pie, does a bit of voluntary work for Weymouth. He said that other results keep going for us. We need to find some consistency. Really do think this league is there for the taking. Was working at Weymouth versus Stockport Saturday and thought Stockport were very average. Now Stockport, who changed the manager in relatively controversial circumstances, we've still got 22 games to go. A lot of people were saying a month ago, Beth, Torquay's won the league. Yeah, we've got one place to play for. It's the playoffs. You look at the situation now, you'd actually say we're games in hand. Technically, Sutton are in the strongest position, but there's still half the season to go.
I think people forget how kind of on and off football is. It's not a predictable game. No 2 seconds are the same, let alone 90 minutes, let alone 2 games, let alone 22. Tables change all the time, I think, particularly in non-league. This is not the Prem. There's not a top 6 Arsenal, Man City, anything can happen. And I think fans struggle with that a little bit. We should be here, we should be better, without taking in the context of every situation. Players have lives. We've all been affected by what's going on recently. They will too, and they're still working throughout this. The fans aren't there. Like you said, some of the results are going our way that have been, quite shocking, and we've not been expecting that. But it just goes to show that really anything can happen. We can go into tomorrow's game win 5-0. We could lose 5-0. Anything can happen, and it's kind of not spoken about enough. I think people. And understandably, the passion gets in the way. And we, like you were saying, we need to win every game. We should be winning every game, and we probably do have the ability to do that. But unpredictability of football is the reason we love the game, I think.
Absolutely. Losclough echoes your sentiments. Les, I think the players miss the supporters. Chris Barker, Les hit the nail on the head. We seem to play most games in 3rd or 4th gear. The Dagenham game is the only one where we did more. The intensity seems to be lacking in most games. See, that's kind of whenever we don't play well, people will say we lack passion, we lack intensity, because we have 2 players for every position, which is not always the case for many of the teams in this division. It's kind of, we must win this. How can we lose to Maidenhead or whatever? But in those days, a long time ago, when you were playing this, Notts were doing that to other teams. Notts were playing Aston Villa in the 3rd tier, weren't they, if you remember rightly? Sunderland were down the 2nd. Crystal Palace, first game of the 74-75 season, with all that Malcolm Allison and the tracksuits and everything. Little Notts County. It doesn't quite work like that. And I keep getting back to the point. You have to be able to cope with being favourites a lot of the time.
Oh yes, at this level of football, if you come to Notts County, you've got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to go out onto that pitch, and maybe the players have got to take this on board, which they did against Dagenham. That's what really impressed me. Every single player took it on board and looked a captain. The more captains that you have on that pitch in your team, the greater chance you've got of winning. Jimmy Cyril he worked with us 2 days every week with a full-scale practice match, so that every single player knew exactly what their job was to do on that pitch, and he stressed the importance of that. You weren't going out there to play football, you were going out there to do a job, and in each position that job was different. When I watch a football match now, I think back to Jimmy's days, and I watch the match and I look at the game and I think, who's going to win the game for us? Who's going to be the one that's going to stick his head in where it might hurt or get kicked off and score a goal? Who's going to put his body in the line when that ball's flying in the net and he might get that ball at him in between the legs where he doesn't like it? And they are what Jimmy called game changers. They are the people that win you the matches. And each player in our team, I feel, has got to go out with that attitude. They had that attitude against Dagenham. They've got to go out there and they've got to be responsible. When you watch games when we're missing badly Cal Roberts, whenever he was on the pitch, you felt he's going to do something here. He's going to unlock a door and that ball's going to finish in the net. A game changer. You know, we've seen time and time again players put the bodies on the line, you know, Kelly Evans, Colin Rawlinson, you know, to block goals, stop chances there. You know, Ben Turner, we've seen all of that. And somehow that has to come through the team, through every single player. You know, some players, it can't happen every match that you're on the ball, you're ready. Sometimes players need a lift. Don Masson was a brilliant captain. He could get players going by upsetting them. Other players, he knew how to stroke them, to caress them, and that's good captaincy. How you deal with that. So collectively, the group of players has to not just rely on the manager. They've got to take it on board themselves and win that game collectively. And I keep going back to Dagenham. They did that with a passion that I've never seen before in that game. So they can do it. They've shown us they can do it once. Let's see it every game.
Give us an insight, Beth, into, so you've got young players on loan, Matty Wolf, Jordan Barnett's come along, Tyler Golden before he got injured, those sorts of players. At the minute, you know, as I understand it, they're in a Premier Inn or whatever, 2 or 3 nights a week and all the rest of it. You can't do a lot. You train. You're in a bubble. So, you know, you can't go and play snooker down the local snooker hall. You can't go out for a meal. Yeah. So if you're in a hotel room, that can be quite an oppressive existence in the current climate. And I guess with you having been to Piran and those sorts of things, these are all lifestyles that you have to cope and adapt to, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I can't say it doesn't affect performances maybe initially. I think recently, was it Sam? Did he have an interview when he first came?
Good night, Sam, yeah.
About coming over and stuff like that. And you know, I kind of likened it to my situation going abroad, in that fans expect you to be like this on top of your game. That can be very difficult because likening it to my situation, I went over abroad without my family during a pandemic. I was in a hotel room for 4 weeks before I got my own place. Lots of things outside of football went wrong. And you have to be able to deal with that. Unfortunately, that is part of being a footballer. But you can't say that it doesn't affect you. So as far as the players going that, you know, that will be kind of cooped up in a room and stuff, I do feel for them. And it takes great mental ability and attitude to kind of overcome these problems, which is part of the job, unfortunately. And kind of especially at the moment, unfortunately, what's happening with the pandemic, you know, it's something they have to do, but you know, you can't bypass the toll that takes either on your mental health or kind of in performances and things like that. You just got to kind of prepare the best you can, whether that be through meals, speaking to people, you know, on the phone and stuff. But yeah, I can imagine it's very tough at the moment for those kind of players.
Yeah, I mean, this is not, let's not, you know, there'll be people out there on bread lines, using food kitchens, very little money, okay? This is not us saying, you know, pampered footballers. This is just a fact of life and how you have to deal with it to enable you to give your best possible performance for the 180 minutes a week, as it stands at the minute, that the fan base see you playing. There are other factors in the background here, particularly in the pandemic, that all go into shaping and moulding how you play in those 90 minutes, isn't it?
Yes, it's I think it's about adaptability is a good word. And as a player, you have to have that. So it's nice to see that there are players, you know, like Barnett and things, getting on the pitch and, you know, have had a couple of decent performances. So it's nice to see. But like you said, it's yeah, it's tough. It's just about adapting to the current situation. But you know, things do go on in your life that affect it as well.
International Women's Day as we speak today, Beth. You're the closest Notts County Ladies International we have, having just come back from Bulgaria. What's the latest with you? Because clearly this pandemic can't be making it easy for your next move, wherever that may be in the world.
No, it's been a bit difficult, to be honest. I had a call with my agent last week, actually. And, you know, there wasn't particularly many updates. I've been offered a few contracts in different countries, which is really exciting. So I'm hoping to take one of those in the next few weeks. But because of restrictions, vaccine rollouts, everything is slow. Everything is slow. So I don't know much more now than I did a week ago, and who knows if I'll know more next week. But yeah, fingers crossed something kind of comes along soon where I'll be able to sign a contract. And I'm on the verge of one, so hopefully that does come off. But yeah, it's been a bit tough with everything that's going on, but you know, what can be done?
And without giving too much away, Bulgaria is positively a short hop from some of the options that you are currently considering, correct? So yeah, we're talking other continents here, aren't we?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, one option especially is a very long way away, and have quite tight restrictions. So bit of a struggle at the moment. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you know, I've had my first vaccine, which is very good. So I'm waiting for the second one. Hopefully kind of all, these things will fall into place, and I can get moving on that front, because it's been a bit tough. You know, not feeling like I don't have a name at the moment, kind of on jogs, thinking maybe soon, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know whether I should be saying this. I had my first COVID jab. I had to go to Derby yesterday, Les, and I woke up this morning and it was like someone had got a hammer and smashed me on my big toe. It felt like all my metatarsals had been shattered. And apparently there is a side effect of something called a COVID toe, which I've had for most of today. But anyway, I made sure I've come out. So I wouldn't have been playing golf today if it had been. I was really struggling. But anyway, I digress. Get the vaccine, okay? Get the vaccine. You've had yours, haven't you, Les? You were fine. Yes, no side effects for you, yeah?
No, I was okay. It was 5 weeks ago now. I'm got the second one coming up next month. No, I was okay. I'll just be glad when everybody's had it done, and then we can look forward to a better way of living, probably.
Absolutely, and we're certainly getting there. Let's just do a little bit of National League update, because I know I've had quite a few messages and texts. What's happening with the National League? Yeah, well, right. So there's an independent panel sitting in judgment of Dover's non-fulfilment of the fixture. And clearly, Dover are going to be rattling up quite a few of those in the coming weeks. So we're waiting for the independent panel to make its decision on that. Now, the cynic might say that when David Bernstein did an independent report on the National League, that was ignored by the National League Committee. But anyway, let's park that. There are fundamentally two options that seem to be available to the National League. One is that Dover's entire league record is expunged. They played 15 games, they've only won 3. So if that was the case, Notts would be one of the main beneficiaries, because we were one of only 3 teams that lost to Dover. It significantly makes the table look a better place for Notts. But as it stands at the minute, each game is going to be judged on its merits by the disciplinary panel. So you can't expunge a club's record for non-fulfilment of one game. Clearly, every week goes by, Dover incur another one and another one. So at some point, the National League will have to decide whether to expunge Dover's record in terms of every game they fail to fulfil. So you hope that will be done sooner rather than later, because you don't want this dragging on till May or June, and when the tables suddenly start changing. So we'll see what happens there. And also, some of you may have seen Boreham Wood have released a letter that they really received from Sport England. because there are, as we know, there are now no grants to football clubs, but loans. It's loans unless you can prove exceptional circumstances of hardship in which a grant would then be assessed for the club. Boreham Wood have had their reply back today to say they are not eligible for a grant. And the reasons it has been stated that they cannot receive a grant is because the future of the club can still be funded both for the rest of this season and next. Now, the difference this time is that clubs have to submit their books and their accounts to Sport England. So one can only assume that whatever people say, when the government has looked at the individual P&L of the club, cash in the bank, whatever, that they are not going to go bust in the next 3 months. Boreham Wood clearly disagree. I find that interesting, and in a way I find it positive. Kings Lynn in the past 48 hours have signed 2 players. That's the clearest indication I can see that Kings Lynn are going to carry on playing. What's your take on all of this, Les?
Oh dear. Obviously, before the lockdown, I was going down to Notts County, and I was always led to believe that going back to September, that this money that was being pumped in was only there up until the end of December. And following that, there would have to be a review. So there was no further grants or funding for any clubs after that. I was also told that the money that was going to be handed out from the National League was going to be on lost earnings through gate receipts, which wasn't the case, and hence the Bernstein review on it all. So some clubs have benefit, and I think you've just mentioned one of them in terms of they've had more funding than probably they would have had if football had been played with supporters going in there. So I can't see that any organisation can look at that and say, well, we're going to help you out, and you've had more money than what you would have had if you had gate money. So where that all sits in the long term, I just can't comprehend it really. Moving on, I'm hearing that players from the tiers below are now, and Stockport have signed 2 or 3 players today as well, haven't they? And so they're all being furloughed out. It's something that I'm not familiar with in football. I don't agree with it. I can't see that. I mean, obviously, I'm old school. I come from a background where loan signings were made when teams were in difficulties. They'd lost and they were able to replace with a loan signing. Now, we've done it today. 3 players coming in, and it's, you're in March. Just where does it all end? I don't know.
James Spring has also made the point that Kings Lynn have been signing 2, possibly 3 players today. Beth, as a player in a professional club, Barrow did this first in the Football League, and I think we said at the time this will catch on if it's legal. So Barrow furloughed some of the players the manager didn't want. Chesterfield have done that as well. Clearly seems to be working for Chesterfield. I remember my son seeing James Rowe at Gloucester and what he was doing there about 4 or 5 months ago. So this is not Johnny come lately. I think Chesterfield are a real threat in terms of there's normally a team comes out of the pack, and James Rowe seems to be doing a good job. But they furloughed several of those players over there the manager doesn't want, and then gone with this core group and are signing new players now. How does that affect the dynamic of the group, would you say, Beth? If that had happened to you at Pirrin or whatever?
I think personally, like Les said, it's very controversial, not very agreeable in my opinion. I think it's difficult. It depends from kind of group to group, but that can cause a divide massively. And I can only imagine, whether it's being said or not, that must be difficulty within the camp of players, because it would feel like preferential treatment to certain players. The reasoning behind that, you're all here to do the same job in the same situation. I can't comment too much on it. I'm not too familiar. I've not read up too much about it all, but I'm aware that that's happening and it's kind of catching on in different clubs and stuff. I don't particularly agree with it at all. But there is kind of a pattern of, like you said, things catching on, and clubs are very devious in that kind of way. But yeah, I think with everything that's happening at the moment, it's just very controversial. There's no way to tell how it's going to affect clubs in the long run, players in the long run. But coming back to your question, it definitely would be having an effect on the players that have been furloughed, and also the pressure on the players that are playing in place of them. And it might be creating a bit of a divide, whether it be in the minds of them or out loud. So it's something I know I definitely struggle with if that was happening to me. So watching on from that is very interesting to see how it's unfolding in every club.
You see, ethically, it's poor.
Yeah.
But it's legal. And I tell you a phrase that's now used, Les, everywhere. We all hear it. Most clubs, or certainly the clubs that are struggling a bit, all have their bomb squads, don't they? The players that are sent to train in a separate group, the players that maybe have got 6 or 7 months of a contract to run, no, they're not going to be played. They're on good money. They're not going to move because they won't get as good a deal somewhere else. And I think clearly, there's no trade secrets. The year Notts were relegated, there was a group of players that Harry Kewell and Neil clearly didn't rate. And you could see those disparate groups. It would have been very interesting if we were in a pandemic as Notts were struggling in that division, whether Notts would have gone down a furlough route for a group of players that weren't part of the manager's problems, because you try and move them on. The players, I'm not going anywhere. I'm being paid this contract. I'm sitting it out. Thank you very much. Because Notts fundamentally were relegated in that season with about 39 professionals. This wasn't 14 pros. So it's kind of the end justifies the mean. You won't, I suspect, have a single person in Chesterfield that is bemoaning a selective furlough at the moment. Ethically, I'm not sure. But in football, Les, isn't it? It's a very brutal game, isn't it? The end justifies the means. As long as you get to where you want to go.
Absolutely. If they're not breaking the law, then they're doing nothing wrong. It's something that nobody will agree with. And maybe if you're furloughing players, you can't sign players is the way forward to stop it.
Very good point. Very good point.
Yeah. It can't be right. As you say, Harry Kewell and Neil Ardley came into Notts. There was obviously, I think we had over 30 players at the time. So if you're going on a training ground, if you're having a match, it's still a dozen players. What are those dozen players doing? They're going to be disruptive, aren't they, if they're not included in it? And the manager doesn't want them near the place, really, if they're not going to fight their way back in. And so the way that the best way to deal with it, if it was an option, would be the furlough, wouldn't it? Just, often they're still getting paid. Like you say, they're not going to leave the club because they're earning more money than they probably would unless another deal comes up. So, yes, it needs looking at, and probably that is the way forward, that you can't sign players if you've got players furloughed.
You know what, subject the obvious. It's a great point, because that then at least levels the playing field, and a club has a practical decision as well as a moral decision. Because fundamentally, if there's a moral decision to be made, it won't be a moral decision. It'll be taken on legal grounds as to what suits you. That's just the brutal world of football with promotion and relegation.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. We will judge Notts Counties this season by whether we get back in the Football League or not. We won't be bothered how we play. We'll say at the minute, where we like this style, blah, 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 blah. This season will only be remembered if we get promoted or we don't.
Yeah.
And people will then juggle the argument around our final finishing position. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're likes of Pirin, Beth, and do the ladies' professional clubs, is it kind of like 18, 19 players, or do you get to the point where you sometimes have 27, 28 players?
For the first team, there was a lot of players signed on. There was a huge academy structure, so there was a lot of girls, and actually I want to say that the minimum age requirement to play women's football was a lot lower, which I was surprised about, because here you have to be 16, don't you, to play senior.
Yeah.
We had a 14-year-old in the squad who did have
in the professional Bulgarian Women's Super League, you can play at 14.
Yes, so we had a 14-year-old right back. So arguable whether it's right or wrong. When I first arrived at in the team, the squad was quite small, and I believe due to injury, that was why certain younger players had been brought in. The rest of them, the younger lot, were kind of 18, 19. But when I first joined, part of the reason I went out there was a lot of ACL and knee injuries. So the squad started off quite small, and then we kind of bolstered our ranks quite a lot, and the squad had ended up, rather large actually. So it was quite a big squad, and kind of every team I've been at that's kind of been the aim, is a larger squad, whereas when I was younger, it wasn't so much the case.
Yeah, a couple more. Chris Barker's been on. Got an impression that Kingston had furloughed the higher earners. Yeah, I think Les was just dealing with that point in that, yes, clubs are selectively furloughing. And I think you'll find the criteria they are using to furlough players is whether they are in the manager's plans, okay, not how much they are earning. So it's a short circuit to get rid of players that you don't want out of the training ground that potentially can cause you problems because you're not going to play them. I think that's how these clubs are interpreting it. And Les makes the very, very brilliant point. You furlough a player, you can't sign any new players. End of story. Kay Oliver Ramsden, bit late joining tonight. How long does Les think, how long does Les think the owners will accept us being in the National League if we fail to get promoted? Look, clearly we can't all gaze into a crystal ball. I think it would be fair to say, Les, that the owners have bought this football club with the intention of it being a football league club, correct?
100%. I feel a little bit sorry for them because I got the opportunity to chat to them back in September when they first took over, and they outlined their plans for the club. And that first season, when we didn't go up, they weren't expecting the club to go up, but what they wanted was the manager to pull together a group of players during that season and for the start of the next season, that's this season, with a view that they've got the right group together, nobody that they don't want, and that there's 22 players there, 2 for each position of equal quality. And come the first match of the season, they can hit the ground running, and any players that needed to be brought in, loan players, that type of thing, that could be addressed on the way through. And with all what's gone on this season, with the lockdown through the summer, the starting late, everything else, I feel sorry for every single manager and every single player in football. Some are doing it, some are not doing it. Some players are performing in empty stadiums, others aren't. We're seeing so many, not just at this level of football, at all football, we're seeing strange results because of it as well. So I can't wait for the crowds to get back, I must say. But going back to the initial question about the owners, I believe, are here to see this club back in the league. Plans are being made. The manager sees the owners every single week with a report of each player, how the club's going, what needs to be done, and they're working with their business as well, which is recruitment. They've got an analysis on the lad that we've just signed today, just like they had on Cal Roberts, how he's performed, and So all this information is readily available to the manager if he's looking for a specific player who's the best available. So they're keen to see their business working in football. So for me, 100%, they will stick with Notts County.
That's good to hear. Forgive my smile halfway through. Come on, Beth, Les, who has got the cuckoo clock?
Me.
Yeah. Did you? You've got your ears in.
I think there's 3 in here somewhere.
I don't recognise that noise.
That's made you laugh.
Oh dear, it's been a cuckoo season, hasn't it? But
yeah, it has.
Right, I think we're now coming to the end. Obviously, the cuckoo clock. It's 4 minutes early, Les, because your cuckoo clock must.
I need to reset it.
The hour, not on the hour.
I think it chimes 6. By the way, it's an hour late.
Oh dear. Your week, everyone, is mapped out. Every evening this week, you can order the stream to watch Notts v Halifax Tuesday. Wednesday night, we've got another live preview ahead of Saturday's visit of Wealdstone. We've got Lee Curtis and Dane Vincent from Gerrit Forward joining us on Wednesday evening's preview. And Thursday, a podcast, mystery guest. What I can tell you is that the story he has told is in the history of the Magpie Circle podcast is by far the most bizarre and incredible story that could only happen at Notts. You will not believe it. I'm not going to give away any more than that. Suffice to say, #Shirtgate. It is an absolute classic. We'll let you in on the secret a little bit later in the week. That concludes our show tonight. Beth, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We've all been trying to guess those shirts in the background, and we're thinking, are they Pirin Blavgorod? Because there's a B there. Let us in on the secret.
Boston Bruins shirts. NHL.
Ice hockey talents as well.
What did you say, sorry?
I said, you have ice hockey talents, or you're just a Bruins fan, yeah?
Yeah, just a fan of the club. My boyfriend's shirt, so he's a massive hockey fan, and so I've got into it through that. But they're his, not mine. So.
Very good, Les. We'll get you back to servicing that cuckoo clock and getting it coming out its little box on the hour on time. Thank you again, Les, as always, and we'll all be tuning in tomorrow night. So thank you.